The first night it happened, Elias Marsh thought someone had broken in. It was 3:14 in the morning. He knew because he'd been lying awake counting the cracks in the ceiling, the way he did most nights since his father's funeral, 6 months and 4 days ago. Then came the sound. A dull, rhythmic thump against the wall he shared with his roommate's bedroom. Thump. Pause. Thump. Pause. Like something, or someone, falling, over and over, refusing to stay down. He sat up. Listened. A voice, low and strained, counting under its breath. 1. 1. 1 again. Come on. Elias had lived with Kai Alvarez for 4 months, ever since a mutual friends group chat had matched two strangers who both needed to split rent and both, apparently, needed to not be alone. In that time he'd learned that Kai left for work before sunrise in scrubs the color of a hospital hallway, that he made too much coffee and always left the extra for Elias without being asked, that he laughed with his whole chest and went quiet with his whole body. He had not learned this thumping, this counting, this voice fraying at the edges like a rope about to give. He almost knocked. His knuckles hovered an inch from the door. Then the sound stopped. A long breath. A whispered okay. Okay. Tomorrow. Footsteps, uneven, crossing to the bed. Silence. Elias lowered his hand and went back to his room, and did not sleep. He told himself it was nothing 3 separate times over the next 2 weeks, and believed himself less each time. The noises came on no schedule he could predict. Tuesday at midnight, Thursday at 4, once on a Sunday afternoon when Elias was supposedly out but had come home early and stood frozen in the hallway, listening to that same thump, that same ragged counting, that same small, furious come on through the door. He built things for a living, cabinets, staircases, the kind of joinery that took patience most people didn't have anymore, and he understood structural failure. He knew the sound of something straining against a weight it wasn't built to hold. This sounded like that. A person straining. His mind went to the worst places first, the way minds do at 3 a.m. someone hurting Kai. Kai hurting himself. He thought of the leftover container in the back of the fridge that never seemed to get smaller, of how Kai's laugh at dinner sometimes arrived a half-second late, like it had to travel further to reach his face than it used to. He didn't ask. That was the wall Elias had built long before this apartment. You didn't ask, because asking meant someone might tell you, and then you'd be responsible for what to do with it. His mother had taught him that, without meaning to, in the 2 years he'd spent watching her get smaller in a hospital bed while everyone around him kept saying she's fine, don't worry him. Nobody had asked him if he wanted to be spared. He'd just learned that not knowing was safer than knowing and being powerless. So he didn't ask Kai. He just started staying awake, listening, worrying in the particular silent way of a man who has never learned another way to love someone. It was Kai who broke first, in the ordinary light of a Tuesday evening, over a pot of something Elias had started and clearly had no plan for. You're going to caramelize that onion into a crime, Kai said, appearing in the kitchen doorway in gray sweats, hair damp from a shower, and nudged Elias aside with a hip check gentle enough to be an apology for something neither of them had said aloud yet. Sit. Watch a professional. You're a paramedic, not a chef. I keep people alive for a living. Onions respect that. Kai took the wooden spoon like he was disarming a bomb, and Elias watched his hands, good hands, sure hands, the kind that had probably held 100 strangers steady on the worst day of their lives, and for one unguarded second, he saw it. A tremor. Small. There and gone, like a hairline crack in glass you only notice when the light hits it wrong. Kai caught him looking and turned the tremor into a flourish, tossing the spoon and catching it. See? Professional. Sure, Elias said, and let it go, because that was easier than the alternative, and because some part of him, the part still raw from watching his mother insist she was fine, don't worry, go to school right up until she wasn't, recognized the performance for exactly what it was. He knew that particular flavor of lying. He'd tasted it his whole childhood. They ate at the counter, shoulders almost touching, and Kai told a story about a man who'd called 911 because his parrot had learned to imitate a smoke alarm, And Elias laughed for the first time in what felt like a week, and underneath the laughing he thought, I am going to have to ask. I don't want to. But I am. He didn't, not that night. But he started leaving his door open a crack, so he'd hear sooner. The night it finally broke open, it wasn't subtle. Elias woke to a sound that wasn't the thumping, a crash, glass against tile, and then a voice that had lost all its performance. Not now. Not now, not now, not, cut off, swallowed, replaced by breathing that came too fast and too shallow to belong to a person who wasn't afraid. He was at the door before he decided to be. Kai. No answer. He pushed it open. Kai was on the floor of his room, back against the bed frame, knees drawn up, right hand pressed flat against his own chest like he could hold something in place by force. A glass had shattered near the window, water pooling dark across the floorboards, catching the streetlight. His left hand was shaking, not the flicker from the kitchen but something bigger, something his whole arm was trying and failing to control, and his face when he looked up had none of the ease Elias had spent 4 months learning to expect from it. It was just fear. Plain, unhidden, and much, much younger than 29. I'm okay, Kai said immediately, automatically, the way you'd say it's fine to a stranger who bumped your shoulder on the subway. Elias crossed the room and sat down on the floor across from him, not touching, not crowding, just present, the way he wished someone had once been present for him. You're not, he said. Not a question. Not an accusation. Just the truth, offered gently, like a hand held out that could be refused. Kai's jaw worked. For a long moment Elias thought he'd get the performance again. The joke, the deflection, the professional charm turned like a shield toward the space between them. Instead, something in Kai's face simply gave way, the way a dam doesn't crack so much as it decides, all at once, that it's done holding. Essential tremor, Kai said, so quietly Elias had to lean in. Started 8 months ago. Getting worse. Neurologist says it could stabilize? Could also, he stopped, swallowed. I start IVs for a living, Elias. I do compressions. I hold people's lives in these hands. If the department finds out, if they think I'm a liability, his voice cracked clean in half. It's the only thing I've ever been good at. It's the only thing I've ever wanted. So you practice, Elias said slowly, understanding arriving in pieces. Alone. At night. So no one sees. Kai laughed, wet and humorless. Physical therapy exercises for fine motor control. Counting reps, trying to trick my own hand into behaving. He held it up between them, watched it shake, like it belonged to someone else. I drop things. I count. I start over. Every night, for months, and it's not working, and I can't tell anyone, because the second I say it out loud it becomes real, and then I have to actually lose something instead of just being scared of losing it. Elias thought of his mother's hospital room, of all the years he'd spent guessing at truths nobody would hand him, of how much he would have given for someone to simply sit on the floor and say you're not okay instead of performing okayness at him until it broke them both. He reached out, slow enough that Kai could pull away, and closed his hand around Kai's trembling one. Didn't try to still it. Just held it, shaking and all. Then I'll know, Elias said. You don't have to be alone in the room anymore. Kai looked at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched without flinching from what the touch might reveal. Then he looked up, and something in his eyes cracked open in a different way, not grief this time. Something closer to hope, dangerous and unfamiliar. Why does that make it worse? Kai whispered, and so much better, at the same time. Elias didn't have an answer. He just didn't let go. They didn't talk about what almost happened on the floor that night. Not directly, not yet, but something in the apartment's architecture shifted anyway. Elias started leaving his door open on purpose now, not to eavesdrop but as an offer. Kai started practicing his exercises in the living room instead of alone behind a locked door, counting out loud, and some nights Elias would sit across from him on the couch and just be a witness, which turned out to be its own kind of medicine. You don't have to watch, Kai said the third night, not quite meeting his eyes, stacking a tower of coins with fingers that trembled around each one. I know, Elias said, and didn't move. The tower fell. Kai swore, softly, and started again. Elias picked up the scattered coins from the floor and set them beside him without comment, not doing the task for him, just making it easier to keep trying, and something about that small, wordless act made Kai's breath catch in a way that had nothing to do with frustration. They fell into a rhythm neither of them named. Elias started coming home earlier from the workshop. Kai started leaving his shift with less exhaustion weighing down his shoulders, because for the first time in 8 months, the hardest part of his day wasn't the part he had to hide when he got home. One night, stacking coins forgotten between them, Kai reached over and adjusted the collar of Elias's flannel, a small, unnecessary gesture, the kind reserved for people you've decided you're allowed to touch, and Elias went very still, aware suddenly of how close their knees were on the couch, how long Kai's hand lingered near his collarbone before dropping away. Sorry, Kai said. Not sounding sorry at all. Don't be, Elias said, and the words came out rougher than he meant them to, full of something he hadn't let himself feel in a very long time. Either of them stacked any more coins that night. It was Elias who told his own truth first, unprompted, on a night when Kai's hands were steady and the fear in the apartment had, for once, gone quiet. My mother was sick for 2 years before she died, he said, staring at the ceiling from his side of the couch, Kai's legs draped over his lap like they'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. Everyone kept it from me. Thought they were protecting me. I used to lie in bed and listen for sounds through the wall, trying to figure out how bad it really was, because nobody would just tell me. Kai went very quiet. That's why you didn't ask me? About the noises. I promised myself I wasn't going to do to you what everyone did to me, Elias said. Guess I still did it a little. Just waited instead of asking. You waited until I was ready, Kai said. That's not the same thing. He shifted, propping himself up on an elbow, closer now, close enough that Elias could feel the warmth radiating off him. You didn't force the door open. You just made sure I knew it was safe to open it myself. Is that what I did? That's exactly what you did. Kai's eyes moved over his face slowly, like he was memorizing something he was afraid might be temporary. Nobody's ever done that for me before. Everyone I've ever loved wanted the version of me that has it handled. You're the first person who just wanted the version of me that doesn't. The space between them had narrowed to almost nothing. Elias could count the small scar above Kai's eyebrow, could see the exact moment Kai's gaze dropped to his mouth and back up, asking a question neither of them had the nerve to say out loud yet. Kai. If you're about to tell me this is a bad idea, Kai said, voice low, I need you to know I've never wanted a bad idea more in my life. Elias closed the distance himself. The kiss was careful at first, cautious, testing, two people who had both spent years learning that wanting things out loud got them taken away, and then it wasn't careful at all. Kai's steady hand came up to frame his jaw, and Elias thought, distantly, that it was the first time he'd felt that hand not shaking, and he understood, with a clarity that frightened him, exactly why. What grew between them after that wasn't a single decision but 100 small ones, repeated daily, like Kai's exercises, a discipline of choosing each other on purpose. Elias learned Kai's rhythms. The mornings his hand shook worst, before caffeine and cortisol caught up with his body, the specific counting exercises that helped most, which Elias started doing beside him, badly, on purpose, so Kai would laugh instead of grit his teeth through the failure. Kai learned Elias's, too, the particular quiet that meant he was thinking about his mother, the way he retreated to the workshop when feelings got too large for the apartment, the fact that he showed love not in words but in the small fixed things he left around the place. A wobbling drawer suddenly steady, a windowsill sanded smooth, a shelf built exactly the height Kai needed and never asked for. You built me a shelf for my medication, Kai said one evening, running his fingers over the joinery. Low enough that he wouldn't drop things reaching for it. You kept knocking the bottles over, Elias said, not looking up from the book he wasn't really reading. That's not what I said. I said you built me a shelf. Kai came and sat beside him, closer than strictly necessary, and rested his head against Elias's shoulder. I've been loved by people who said it constantly and meant it least. You've said it maybe never, and I have never felt so certain of anything. Elias set the book down. I love you, he said plainly, like it was the easiest true thing he'd ever said, because, he realized, saying it, it was. Kai went still against him, and when he spoke again his voice wasn't entirely steady, and for once it had nothing to do with the tremor. Say it again. I want to make sure it's real. I love you, Elias said again, and kissed the top of his head, and felt, for the first time since his father died, something in his chest that wasn't bracing for loss. The fear came back, as fear does, dressed as an ordinary Thursday. Elias was in the workshop when his phone buzzed with a text that made his stomach drop before he'd even fully read it. At the hospital. Not me, I'm fine. Need you here. Please. He broke 3 traffic laws getting there. Found Kai in the staff hallway of the ER, still in uniform, sitting on a supply room floor with his back against the wall, hands pressed over his face. Kai. I dropped it. Kai's voice was hollow, flattened by shock. Mid-call. Cardiac arrest, elderly patient. I was drawing up AP in my hand it went, all at once, worse than it's ever been, and I dropped the syringe, and Marisol had to grab it and finish, and the patient's fine, she made it, but everyone saw, Elias. Everyone saw my hand fail in the one moment it can't. Elias sat down on the floor beside him, the way he had that first night, and didn't say anything for a long moment, letting Kai's breathing find its way back towards steady. They're going to pull me off active duty, Kai said. Pending review. Maybe permanently. 8 years, Elias. 8 years of being the person who shows up when everything's falling apart, and now I'm the thing that's falling apart. You're not the thing that's falling apart, Elias said. You're a person whose hand shakes sometimes, who's spent 8 months trying to solve that alone because you were terrified of exactly this conversation. That's not failure. That's a body doing something a body does. And you caught it before anyone got hurt, because you trained yourself, alone, in secret, for months, to catch exactly this. That's not the story they'll tell. Then you tell them a truer one. Elias took his hand, the shaking one, always the shaking one, because that was the one that needed holding most, and held it steady between both of his own. You've been hiding a body that's asking for accommodation, not accusation. There are protocols for this. Modified duty. Adaptive tools. You are not the only paramedic in this country with a tremor, Kai. You're just the one who spent 8 months alone thinking you had to be. Kai looked at him for a long time, something breaking and mending at once behind his eyes. I don't know how to do this without hiding, he admitted. Hiding is the only version of surviving I know. Then let's learn a different version together, Elias said. You don't have to walk into that meeting alone either. He didn't. Elias sat in the waiting room during the review, and when Kai came out 3 hours later, pale, wrung out, but upright, he told Elias everything in the parking lot, leaning against the truck with the kind of exhaustion that comes only after telling a hard truth out loud for the first time. Modified duty for now. Occupational therapy through the department. A supervisor who, it turned out, had a brother with Parkinson's and had spent the entire meeting less interested in punishment than in solutions, adaptive syringe grips, a partner protocol for high-precision tasks, a path back to full duty if his condition stabilized, and if it didn't, a transition track into training and dispatch that didn't feel like defeat so much as a different shape of the same calling. I kept waiting for them to tell me I was done, Kai said. Instead they asked me why I waited 8 months to say anything. What did you tell them? That I had a roommate who taught me it's safer to ask than to guess. Kai's mouth curved, tired and real. I told them I had you. Recovery, if that was even the word for a condition with no fixed cure, only a life reshaped around it, wasn't a straight line. There were nights the tremor flared and Kai's frustration flared with it, nights he pulled away out of old habit before catching himself and coming back. There were nights Elias's own ghost surfaced, the old reflex to disappear into silence rather than risk needing someone who might, someday, disappear on him too. But they kept choosing. That was the thing nobody told you about love that survived its first real test. It wasn't a single triumphant scene, it was 10,000 small returns. Kai leaving his door open. Elias asking instead of guessing. A hand reached for, again and again, in the dark, in the daylight, in supply closets and kitchens and on the floor beside a shattered glass. 6 months after that first night of thumping and counting, Elias built something in the workshop he didn't tell Kai about, a low, wide bench for beside the front door, sturdy enough to sit on while lacing boots, with a groove worn smooth along one edge, purpose-built for a hand that sometimes needed somewhere steady to rest. Kai found it on a Tuesday, ran his fingers along the groove, understood exactly what it was for without being told, and sat down on the floor of their apartment and cried, not from grief this time, but from the specific, overwhelming relief of being fully known and still, somehow, wanted. "You keep building me places to be steady," Kai said, when he could speak again. "You keep giving me reasons to," Elias said, and sat down on the floor beside him, the way he had that very first night. Except now there was nothing to fear in the room. Just two people who had learned, slowly and on purpose, how to stop hiding from each other. A year to the day since Elias first heard thumping through a shared wall, they sat on that same bench together, lacing up boots for a hike neither of them was in a hurry to start. Kai's hand shook, lacing the knot. Elias didn't reach to finish it for him. He just waited, the way he'd learned to, letting Kai find his own rhythm, ready if asked but never assuming he'd be needed. Kai finished the knot himself. Looked up, sun catching gold in his eyes, and said quiet and certain, "I used to think the scariest sound in the world was my own hand failing me in the dark. Turns out it was just the sound of me finally being honest. Everything after that was just you listening." Elias laced his fingers through Kai's, the trembling one, always that one first, and didn't say anything, because some truths didn't need saying twice. They walked out into the morning together, unhurried, the door left open behind them, the way it always was now.